Hello, I'm Tom Hopkins. I'm an assistant professor at Bossier Parish Community College, and I teach programming. And in this segment, what we're going to do is talk about Python and the Python language and functions and how we group statements together. What we're going to cover is the functions, what it is, and why we use them. We're going to talk about how to write the functions in Python language. We're going to talk about variables inside and outside. And we're going to talk about parameters, how to pass the values between the functions. Okay, let's get started. You may have already seen the segment on functions, the general segment that we have. This quick review, a function is a group of statements within a program that perform a specific task. And those tasks then allow us to break a whole line of statements up into parts or into separate pieces. We usually call this, it's commonly called a divide and conquer approach, or also a modularized program, which is a program where each task is built inside a particular function. And there's a couple reasons for doing this. When we look at it, what we see on the left is a typical old program, the way programming started off to be, which was just a series of long statements, one after another. The computer always starts up at the top, and it reads the first one into memory, the second one into memory, and once it gets most of the statements in memory, then it will turn around and start activating or acting upon each statement one after another. Now, this can be rather a long approach because if you think about it, if one individual sat down to write a program, let's say Windows 7, which has somewhere around 70 million lines of code, well, you can see you can spend your lifetime writing just one program. What we can do is take this program, these long sequence of statements, and we can divide it up into functions. And we can take those functions then, and it allows us to do troubleshooting, or debug as we call it, on each one of the functions. We can also take it and separate it out into tasks and then provide, have each group do a particular task. Functions allow us to really do a lot of capability that we have. It allows us to break it up into pieces. One of the things you now have is anytime you build a program, you're going to have a team. Each one of the team members can then work on a particular function, and then of course at the end they put it all together and you've got a program. Of course, some of the bigger ones, like Microsoft building Windows, an operating system like Windows 7, they're going to have teams for each one of the functions that they build. Now, let's talk about Python itself and how you define a function and how you're going to call it. Now, here are the particular rules, shall we say. When you start to build a function in Python, you're going to have to give it a name. It's just quite a bit like variables. And if you'll notice that the naming rules are pretty much the same as variables. You can't use a keyword for a function name. For instance, you can't use print because that's already built into the program. It can't contain spaces. The first character has to be a letter or an underscore, although most programmers don't use an underscore as the first character. It just doesn't look very, very good. All the other characters, they can be any letters, any numbers you wish to use, or an underscore. But the underscore is the only non-alphanumeric character that you can use. And in Python, the uppercase and the lowercase characters are distinct and different. So if you've got a function, let's say function 1, and you write it in all capitals, and you also write a function in lowercase, those are going to be two separate functions that can be called. Okay? All right. Function name should be descriptive of what you want it to do. For instance, just saying function doesn't really tell you anything. But let's say get name would tell you what that function is supposed to be, or add numbers. So try to make the function name descriptive of what it does, so that way it's a lot easier to find it and figure out what a function that you're looking at. It'll give you a quicker look at what that's supposed to do. Now, how do you write it? In Python, it's going to be def is the keyword. You're going to put a function name, and then you're going to put empty parentheses for right now, and followed by a colon. Now the colon, what it does is it automatically gives us an indent for all the rest of the statements. So that forms a block of code that belongs to that function. Okay, for an example, and this is written in the Python language, you would have def message, empty parentheses, colon, and then I've got 4 print statements that are going to be part of this function. Now, we haven't called it. All we've done is written it. When you run this program, what it does is it takes this function, loads it into memory, and then it holds it there in your random access memory until that message is called. And you're going to write the call as just the name and the empty parentheses. Okay, so what you would have is the rest of it. Now these 3 print lines are to the left margin. They are outside the function. It's a simple line of code. I would like to have Arthur talk. So let's have him come down from the top, and notice here what we're doing is this message right here, oops, sorry about that. This message right in here that you're seeing is going to be the function call. The function is the name of the function, empty parentheses. Now the only thing about this is a caveat. You have to have the function written into memory before you call it. If you try to call it before those lines are read into memory, then of course you're going to get a failure. Okay, let's take a look at how this is going to work from the actual okay, let's take a look at how it's actually going to look in Python itself. Now here's the Python idle, and I have 2 lines that are commented out just to tell you, just to remind me what this program does, and I have a function right here, and it's called message, and the message is going to be, this is a message from the message function. I'd put this print in there just to let us know when it actually runs where these lines are coming from. It says, I am Arthur, King of the Britons. Now we'll go back to the line after the message call. This is important because the message, once you've run the function, it will return to wherever that function was called to the line just after it. So the regular programming will then continue. And of course, these print lines here that say this is a simple line of code, these 3 print lines, or 4, are outside of the function. And then this is the function call, message, down here. This is the function call right here, which then has the function name, open close parentheses, nothing else, there's no other punctuation. And of course, then we're going to return here to 4 print lines, which is outside of the function, and we're going to call that function again a second time, which we can do. Okay, let's run this and see what it looks like. And you'll notice this ran rather quickly because there's not a whole lot to it. But now, as you can see, we have, it read the over here on the right side, it read the message function into the memory. We've then started the program. It prints these 4 lines. Notice that this print line right here, which is empty, there's 2 different ways of doing it. This one's got 2 single quotes in it. The one down below here has just empty parentheses. Either way, that will print you a blank line. So we've read that into memory, and then we come down here and we've got message. It calls the function. The function then, the computer goes back, grabs the function, activates or runs that function, and then it will return back to this print line here after where we called it, saying now we're outside the function. If you'll look over on the left side, you'll see this is a simple line of code. I'd like to have Arthur talk, and you can see this is where it's coming from. And then you've got the message call. Here's the function. I'm Arthur, King of the Britons. Now we'll go back to the line after the message call. We go back to our regular programming lines. We call the message forward again, and then the message runs again. You can have these functions run over and over again. Okay. All right, let's go back to our slides and see what we've got next for you. Okay, let's talk about variables. You've already had a segment on variables, I hope. And so this is what I call variables inside-outside. Variables, as you remember, are a container in memory that holds some value. It could hold a string of text, or it could be actual numbers. Now, the variables that are written inside the function are called local variables. They exist only in that function. As long as the function is running, that variable exists in memory. That value is available for the function to use. However, it's not available to any programming lines that are outside the function. Those variables that are written outside any function are called global variables, and any function can use them. Okay, take a look at this program. This is written in Python as well. We'll try to stay with that language. Now, if you'll notice here, we have a variable x equals 100. That's going to be an outside variable, or a global variable. Then we've got a function var x. Notice I'm keeping to the naming rules, but it's telling me it's a variable x, and it has empty parentheses, colon, and I have y equals 15, x equals 5, and we're going to print x. I'm not going to bother with printing y. And then I'm going to call that function forward in this var x here. Then we're going to print a global x. Now what I did here, the reason for using this particular example is because now you can see that the global x, when I asked it to print x, is going to print the outside one, not the inside one, or the global variable, not the local variable as defined inside the function. Okay, let's take a look at how this works. Here's the same thing, and I'm just going to back that up. Okay, here's the same thing in the Python idle, and here's the x100, and of course here we've got a function called def var x, as I mentioned. Now let's run this and see what happens. As we run it, it's going to read this x equals 100 into memory. It's going to read the function into memory. We're going to call that function. The function's going to run then. It's going to run and it's going to put in variable x and y into memory. It's going to then print local x equals. This is nothing but just text set inside double quotes. But then outside the double quotes, I'm going to put a comma x, which tells it to go find the value of x and put at the end of this string. Let's see what it looks like. And here, as you can see, I've got the local x is equal to 5. That comes from inside the function. And the global x is 100. And this print, since it's outside the function, is going to print the 100. And now you can see that these two x's are not the same variable. Okay? All right. Well, let's take another look at what do we do inside these parentheses. Okay, the next thing we can do is we can pass arguments back and forth between functions. So a local variable that's inside a function, remember I said we can't use that outside of a function. So the local variable is inside the function and it only can be used by that function. Well, let's try something else. Let's take that variable value. We're going to put it in the function call. We're going to call it a parameter, just a different name. And the format looks like this. Instead of calling just function name empty parentheses, we're going to put that variable name inside that parameter, inside the parentheses. And that then, when it calls the function, it's going to pass that value to the next function. So let's see how this works. So what we have now is in the Python. Let me get that over so you can see it. So now we've got the program demonstrates, it's just some comments again, but here we're going to use main, which is the main function that I've written. It has a value of 100, and then right here, show double value. What we're going to do is take that value, which is a variable name, we're going to put it in the parentheses when we call show double. Now we're calling it before the second function is written, but one of the things about Python and most other programming, it will grab and read all of the functions into memory before it runs it. So if you'll notice down here at the last line, I'm calling the main function after both of those functions are read. So I can easily tell the main function to go up here and show double, calling the show double function. And notice that this value here and this number here, this value is a variable that has a value of 100. It's going to pass that 100. In the show double, I need a container to put it in. In other words, I need a variable. So in that parentheses, I then name a variable. Both these names can be the same or they can be different, like I have shown here. So what it looks like is this. So you can see that the show double here has passed 100 to the variable number in the show double function, and we're going to use that. So now we're going to use that to do this with, and when we're finished, of course, then we're done with the program. We wind up running it like this. Real simple program, but here you can see in the first function, it prints the value of value is 100, and the number times 2 is out of this show double function, and of course it's passed 100 to number I've taken a number, multiplied it by 2, and I come up with a result. Okay. Now, let's take one last thing we're going to take a look at. Let's take a look at passing multiple parameters. And yes, you can do that. We're going to take the same one, except I've added x, y, and z as variables in the main function. And then when I call show double, I'm going to use x, y, and z separated by a comma. Now, if you'll notice that the x is then going to send that value of x to the first variable or parameter of show double. The y is then going to send it to the second one, and the z is going to go to the third one. They will always stay consistent. First one to first one, second one to second one, etc. And then we'll be able to do this particular show double. I'll be able to run that program, and we'll be able to do this mathematical expression here. And so it winds up looking like this, and we can run the program. And you'll see that in this case, number is equal to 300, which is the variable result, and that's going to be the result here. So this variable result is then going to be added to my print statement. Now, one of the things quickly I wanted to show you was, remember when the order of precedence of numbers. If I took these parentheses out, remember that the system, all math, it does the multiplication and the division first, then it adds the numbers. So if you'll notice, if I take the parentheses off this, it will multiply num2 by num3, then we'll add it to num1. So consequently, we should have 2 times 50 is 100. Added to 100, it should come up with a result of 200. And I guessed right. Okay, so it gives you an idea of what functions are. And so now we've covered the advantages of using functions, what a function is. We've talked about the syntax for defining and calling a function. We've used local variables and their scope, in other words, how far can they be read. We've talked about global variables, and we've talked about passing arguments from one function to the next. Hopefully this will help you modularize your next program. And thank you very much.